let us start with our two Mangala shlokas which we have learned. The one of yesterday, Yasun Meshan Meshabhyam, and the homage to the Master, or to the word of the Master, which we learned on the first day. Yasyun Meshani Meshabhyam Jagata Phalayodaya Tam Shakti Chakra Vibhava Prabhavam Shankaram Stuma Yasyun Meshani Meshabhyam Jagata Shakti Chakra Vibhava Prabhavam Shankaram Stuma. Once more. Yasyun Meshani Meshabhyam Jagata Pralayodaya Tam Shakti Chakra Vibhava Now the first one was a different tune. My voice is just Agatha Samshayam Bodhi Samudaranatarini Vande Chitrantam Guru Bharatim Agatha Samshayam Bodhi Samudaranatarim Vande Vichitrata Padam Chitrantam Guru Bharatim. It's a little more difficult. Once more. Agatha Samshayam Bodhi Samudaranatarim Vande Vichitrata Padam Chitrantam Guru Bharatim. Although I have been urged to go faster, and I will also do it, but you please forgive me if I go back once to the very first shloka and to one meaning. And of course it has so many meanings, as it says Vichitrata Padam Guru Bharatim. It has so many meanings, but one meaning I didn't want us to miss out, and because it's a very basic concept of Kashmir Shaivism and of the entire spirituality. And that is the concept of that everything is related to everything else. Sarvam Sarvatmakam. And he gives one of the interpretations, he means Kshemaraja, one of the interpretations of this first shloka, he explains in that light that everything is related to everything else, because this whole manifestation is an expression of the divine freedom, total freedom, swatantriya. And, well, in the Sanskrit text it would be page 6, in the translation page 11. But I'm not going into the details, but only to... There is a process of, in the whole of Shaiva, not only cosmology, but what now to quote Panika, cosmotheandric, means everything is connected, the cosmic, the divine, and the human. They are all connected. So the 36 tattvas of the Shaiva cosmology are not only cosmology. You have the cosmos from the earth upwards, and then you have the human elements, the senses, even the internal senses, and so on. And then you have the divine levels of divine manifestation from Sadashiva, Ishvara, Shakti, and Shiva, and with all the intermediates. So that it's all a hierarchy of continuity. There's only one break in that hierarchy, and that is Maya. Maya is the limit, so that whatever is below Maya Tattva is called the impure parts, and what is above Maya, starting with Shuddha Vidya, the pure wisdom, is called the pure part. And part means that there is always a double movement, and this is this whole Shakti chakra going on, the movement of descent from the divine down to the earth, and ascent from the earth to the divine. And this movement is also constantly going on. Not only is it a movement of descending and ascending, but it's also a movement of constant interrelatedness, total interrelatedness. And that is where what Abhinavagupta develops most extensively in his commentary on the Bharatrishika Tantra, that every single element is connected with every other element. Well, even the word element is not the right translation of tattva, but some people translate it as level of reality or category, but category is a bit too abstract. So this interconnectedness is something, some basic insight without which you cannot understand whatever is going to follow now, both in practice and in theory. Because if you disconnect, if you take out elements in a disconnected way, then you have missed the whole point. So he says here, Evam cha sarvam sarvamayam eva patayati. Everything means every detail, every element manifests the totality. So every single entity reveals the totality. And that is, of course, a vision which you have to acquire by practicing things which we have learned in the Vijnana Bhairava. It doesn't come automatic. And as we have the beautiful example of Utpaladeva, which is one of my favorite verses in the whole of this tradition, where he says, maybe I'm tempted to quote Utpaladeva, which even Kshemaraja is tempted, so I'm not alone in this. With my eyes closed, relishing within the wonder of inner devotion, may I worship even the blades of grass thus, glory to Shiva, to myself. Anta bhakti chamatkara chavana milite kshana, namo mahyam shivayeti pujayansyam trinanyapi. So even the blades of grass, which belong categorically to the element earth, even they are Shiva. But you have to experience that only when you go into that internal state of absorption where all these differences disappear. And they don't disappear in a kind of mix-up. It is a total misunderstanding. It's not a mix-up. The elements are clearly distinguished, but they are clearly interconnected. So it's not a, kitchery where everything is. But it is, you experience Shiva in the blade of grass. So the blade of grass is still a blade of grass, and yet it is something totally connected with the total reality. Thus he shows, this is the translation from this little passage, he shows the succeeding stages or elements in a developed form in the preceding ones by making them give up their limitation, and the preceding ones in a limited form by suppressing their higher state in the order of descent. This is the ascending and descending. So he shows everything as of the nature of everything else. The usual perception of difference is due only to limitation caused to appear by him. The teaching of this Shastra is meant to destroy this perception of difference. Enough of this exertion. So the main purpose of this teaching is to overcome this sense of separation, Peda. Everything that we perceive in a separate way. So now we come to verse 4. Okay, we can go a little quicker. Page 40. Aham sukhi cha dukhi cha raktash cha iti adi samvida sukadi avastha anusyute vartante anyatrata sputam. I am happy, I am miserable, I am attached. These and other, cognition I wouldn't say, these and other states, mental states, or have their being evidently in another, in which the states of happiness, misery, etc. are strung together. Now the word in another is anyatra, means literally elsewhere. So it doesn't mean any person, elsewhere. The connection is in something else. So these are the normal mental states which we experience and which we the ordinary human being experiences them as very separate, but always alternating, you see. Now I'm very happy, so I'm just in that, and then the next moment I'm very unhappy, and so as if there is no continuity underlying these mental states. But he says they are threaded together like pearls on a string. So there is something underlying these states, and this. We are not going into the whole commentary. This is not necessary here, although there are some beautiful passages. But I'm going to the last part of the commentary in the book 42-43. So there are different interpretations of this anyatra elsewhere. So first he says, page 41, these different states, the rest, the interconnection, anusandhana. Now anusandhana is a very important term in this school, which means not only interconnection but also a kind of contemplation, connecting the elements, uniting, unifying. The interconnection of the ephemeral cognitions and the ideas born of their residual traces will not be possible, for these cognitions disappear as soon as they rise and cannot leave behind any traces, and so on. Now, what is, if you know that the basic term for consciousness in this school is samvit, but here samvit is used in the plural. which is, it has, of course, different implications, and Samvit in the plural means states of consciousness, or perceptions, or cognitions also. Perceptions or cognitions, states of consciousness. So he starts, actually, when he starts analyzing, and we know this methodologies, it was also in the Pativinyahridaya, starting analyzing the ordinary consciousness. What happens in ordinary human beings, what kinds of experiences, and how they identify these experiences, and then to proceed from there and to rise to the higher states of consciousness. Now, and there is another interesting level of interpretation. That one level would be that these states reside really in Shankara, or in that highest consciousness, but not only. He gives another interpretation where he says Anyatra does not mean in Shankara, who is a compact mass of light and bliss, and who is our own essential nature, as is accepted by us. Therefore, this self is not always tarnished by the conditions of pleasure, pain, etc., but is rather of the nature of consciousness. When he, by his own impurity to be described later, conceals his essential nature and appears in that state, then he is in the Puryashtaka state. Now, what means Puryashtaka is the city of 8, literally, and the city is the body, and the body has 8 constituent elements, and these are the 5 senses, the Manasbuddhi and Ahamkara, the mind, the intellect, and the ego sense. So this is always intriguing for Western psychologists, that Indian psychology puts the mind, the intellect, and the ego all together with the senses. It's all at the level of the senses. It's not yet what in the West we would call the soul or spirit and so on. It's all part of a psychophysical entity, which we are. So Puryashtaka is a very technical term, but it includes Manas, Buddhi, Ahamkara. So these states, I'm happy, I'm unhappy, and so on, they have their basis, if you talk psychologically, in the Puryashtaka. So they are caused by these emotions and this sense experience and so on. So their basis is it's sometimes also translated as psychic apparatus. I don't like the word apparatus, but the psychic body, we can say. Subtle body also. The subtle body. And he has the experience of happiness, etc. It has already been said that even in that state, pleasure, etc., cannot obstruct his real nature. He is never concealed by pleasure, etc. Now, this is again referring to the second shloka, where he says, nothing can obstruct him. So even those very plain and basic experiences which we are identifying with our individual psychic body, even those cannot obstruct him. This is a great, going back to the second shloka. The real purport in saying I'm happy, I'm miserable, etc., by abandoning such beliefs as I am thin, I am fat, etc., is this. One recognizes one's essential nature as Shiva by submerging his Puryashtaka state, which is full of experiences like pleasure, etc., in the inner essential self, and also by dissolving along with it the external aspect consisting of the body, jar, etc. Thus one should always make an earnest effort for allaying the Puryashtaka. I don't like that word, allaying. The word in Sanskrit is sham Puryashtakam, Shamanaya. Again, the word Shankara we have derived from Sham karoti iti Shankara. So and Sham is the basic meaning is of course peace or goodness and so on. So to appease this, bring it to rest. Well, even the description of extinction in Nirvana, it's also used with the same verb sometimes. Sham means to bring to a state of rest. So even these very ordinary experiences which we identify with our very limited individual being, they are not an obstacle, but an effort has to be made to bring this whole system of our sensual and psychic experience, to bring it to rest or to appease it in that, to dissolve it, to dissolve all this in that dissolving. Now again, I'm not so happy with the translation. Shiva Svabhavatvam. So in the very essential nature of Shiva. Cessation is a good word. Cessation is good, yeah. But before cessation, I had this big problem because the first thing I translated in my life was the Yoga Sutras. And this Chittavritti Nirodha. So the question of Nirodha, mostly it has been translated as suppression. I said it is not suppression. And so even cessation, of course cessation can be also gradual, it doesn't need to be violent. But although the word Nirodha implies all this, but still I translated it in a different I translated it more in this sense, coming to rest or coming to a state of, coming to reaching a state of cessation, but it's a gradual process. It's not violent. It's like when you drive a car and you suddenly, because of some obstacle, you have to put the brake very suddenly, and which can cause injury mentally. In the case of stopping these Puryashtaka suddenly, but it is Sham. Sham means to come to rest gradually, peacefully, in a peaceful way. Yes, to ultimately to come to cessation, but not in a violent way. That's why that word Sham, that verb. See, the Sanskrit is Puryashtaka Bhumim Antamukhe Pade Nimaja. See, it is very beautifully expressed, that merging in that internalized state, merging that Puryashtaka in that internalized, interiorized state, Antamukhe Pade Nimajayam. And Nimajanam, this is so frequently used also in the sense of absorption, contemplation in the sense of deep absorption. Like we have this one Shiva Sutra where you have to merge in that great lake of consciousness. You know it?
It was in the
yeah. Well, we will find it. So that merging in that lake of consciousness, that is what we do in contemplative meditation. And this is the same Nimajjanam. And our great friend Lillian Silburn, who was a great disciple of Swami Lakshmanju and a great scholar, when we used to sit in meditation together, she would not say anything. She would just say, "On va plonger." We're going to plunge. It's just like you are standing on the shore of the lake, and you're just going to plunge.
Is that 22?
Huh?
22.
You have. That doesn't matter.
22 of the first.
Yeah. Maharada Anusandhanat Mantravirya Anubhava. But that doesn't use the same verb, but the meaning is that merging in that great lake. So that's why, I have to go back to the Sanskrit to satisfy myself, otherwise these translations. Nimajayams tat anushangena bahyasya api. So not only merging that internal psychic body in that internalized state, but even external things like the body and the pot and so on, so things, objects which you perceive. And merging it where? Svam Shiva Svabhava Tvam, in that one's own divine nature, I would say. Shiva Svabhava. Savata Puryashtaka Shamanaya Iti Yatna. So, what this sutra, or what this, well, I'm not wrong in saying sutra, this Kārikā teaches us is that there are these ordinary perceptions, ordinary experiences, which every being, not even human beings, even animals, even the dogs, they are happy if you feed them, they are unhappy if you don't feed them. So this is a very common state, Puryashtaka. But these states have to be recognized that they have some underlying basis. That underlying basis may be either our own psyche, which is also an expression of the Shiva nature, as he says, or it is that divine nature itself. Svam Shiva Svabhavam. Svam Shiva Svabhavam, one's own divine nature. And then the spiritual practice or the meditation, whatever you may call it, consists in merging that limited perception which is conditioned by your senses and your ego and your mind and so on. So all these things which determine us all the time, condition us all the time. But to all this whole conditioning, to make it merge in that Svam Shiva Svabhavam, one's own divine nature. Swamiji has, this is a very brief transcript of his teaching, the Spanda Kārikā, but it's not at all edited, so there are only a few ideas I can take out of it. He says Sukha, Dukkha and Raga, they are woven in that Spanda. Of course, Spanda is only given by the commentary, not by the text. They are residing in that. This perception that I'm happy, that I'm sad, I'm attached, etc. This kind of perception exists in that state of God consciousness where all these perceptions are woven together. So that image of that string weaving together. And the next one, these are connected. Na dukkham, na sukham, yatra na grahyam, grahakam, na cha asti mura bhavo, api tadasti paramartata. Here again, I'm not very happy with the translation. If you would make some modification. Page 45 in the book. Wherein neither pain, nor pleasure, nor object, nor subject exist, nor wherein does even insentiency, he says, mura bhava. Now mura bhava means also state of confusion. And it's very often said when you, what are the three basic states, mental states, happiness, unhappiness and confusion, because confusion is neither here nor there. So moha, mostly it is called moha. but Vimura or Mudabhava, it is also state of confusion. It's a kind of the third state. That tat asti paramartata. So now here I agree with that sutra style. Don't say what it is. Only it is not Spanda, it is nothing. That exists in reality. Tat asti paramartata. And it's just a negation. See, there is neither happiness, nor sadness, nor subject, nor object, nor confusion. That is in reality. And that reminds us of the Vijnana Bhairava, where he says, well, if you deny all this, if you empty all that, what remains? Tat taptvam avashishyate. Reality alone remains. So don't name it. Don't say what is that reality. Don't give it a name. Again, we are applying our own mind, our own vikalpa. But just, there is neither pleasure, nor pain, nor confusion, nor subject, nor object. That exists in reality. Tat asti paramartata. So this comes much closer to that true negation of what we find so strongly in Buddhism. So Jaidev Singh has added the Spanda principle and so on, so just put it in bracket, but that exists in reality. And then he gives, so I'm really in good company because I'm so happy. Not only my master Swami Lakshmanju, but Kshemaraja already, they were fond of the two texts of which I am also most fond. That is Vijnana Bhairava and Shivastotravali. And which was all the time on Swamiji's lips, all the time. But even starting from Kshemaraja, it's very much in the tradition. And the interesting thing is that the two texts are so different. The Vijnana Bhairava is a typical Tantra, and Shivastotravali is typical Bhakti. But they are so complementary. So he also quotes again and again from Shivastotravali, and he always calls Utpaladeva Rahasya Tattvavit, the knower of the secret, the knower of the mystery. And this Rahasya, he doesn't mean the Ishvarapati Vijnana Kārikā, he means the Shivastotravali. By Rahasya, as you say, the mystic. Then I asked, what do you mean by mystic? So it doesn't necessarily mean a Pandit who knows all the Shastras, but who has that experience. And that experience is expressed in the Shivastotravali. So now we'll again and then see what he says, that these experiences which are here denied, that whatever inner object there is, like pain, pleasure, etc., or whatever external object like blue or yellow or whatever subject like the Puryashtaka body and senses, have evidently no existence. When they are experienced, then being experienced, they are of the nature of consciousness. And that is they are simply consciousness. And so on.
Can I have a question? Can I have a question?
Yeah.
I mean, we ordinary human beings, we have some particular type of consciousness, what you already said, human, or you gave some word, ordinary consciousness. So as far as we are concerned, the states of happiness and the dukh and all these things, how should we as a human being observe them? I mean, what should be the state of our consciousness that time?
But that's what you just said in the last sutta. That's what he just said. That you be aware that all these states arise from your Puryashtaka, means from your own psychological makeup, if you want to call it like that. And then this psychological makeup, this is not a final thing. This you have to merge it into your divine nature. That's what he said at the end. It's very clearly said. So what you do in your meditation or in your spiritual practice, it is precisely transforming these experiences and the basis of these experiences, which is your limited individuality, and then merging it into that, your own divine nature. Svam Shiva Svabhavam. So that's what he just said. And here it is one step further, which means to say that these states don't exist. Neither subject nor object nor happiness nor sorrow. Yeah, now he gives there are two interpretations of Mura Bhava. So either it is a state of confusion, as I said, or it is a state of insentiency, which means jara. Now, in the whole system, there is nothing which is totally insentient. And that's precisely the Spanda which is underlying the whole of reality, which means there's nothing which is insentient, nothing which is simply, how do you call it, not material, of course it is material, but it is, everything is filled with that Spanda, everything is filled with that consciousness. So that's what Utpaladeva just said, even the blade of grass is full of the same consciousness, but to experience it, you must go through a process of transformation. And that transformation is precisely transformation of your individual limited, identifying yourself with your mind and your body and your senses and the external conditionings and so on. And that transformation has to take place, and then you perceive the whole world in a different way. And everything becomes vibrant with that Spanda, and that everything becomes transparent. Now he goes into the question, the commentary goes into the question of Prakasha Vimarsha, and there he's hitting at the Vedantis, but there's a very, I'm sorry, I cannot resist using this quotation. He says, what happens, it's not Kshemaraja, he quotes Pattanayaka. Now Pattanayaka was one of the great aestheticians and poeticians of Kashmir, who has strongly influenced Abhinavagupta in the field of poetics. And this quotation is sometimes found when it's a question that the people, the Vedantis, they don't recognize Shakti. See, for them, Brahman is everything. Then he says, Napumsakamidam nata param brahma palet kiyat tat paurushi niyoktrit chet nasya tat shakti sundari. Again, I don't like his translation, but see, your supreme Brahman, which is neuter, and neuter means also eunuch, how can it bring any fruit unless it is stimulated by this beautiful energy, Shakti? Unless it is stimulated by this beautiful Shakti, how can it produce anything? So that's the criticism of Brahman, of the Vedantic Brahman, of course by a poetician, but it has been quoted many times that without Shakti, how can you have anything, any creation, any manifestation, any beauty also, but it's not only beauty, it's the whole of reality, which depends on Shakti. So
manifestation,
Shakti
is stimulated by Shiva, or is Shiva stimulated by Shakti?
Well, I mean, he says Brahman should be stimulated by Shakti, but Brahman being a eunuch, so how can he be?
But in Kashmiri Shaivism, the base is supposed to be Shiva. And
well, they are undivided, so you cannot give any priority. It's abheda. It is abheda, but it is a dynamic. I mean, the Shakti means dynamism. So that dynamism is inherent in the divine reality itself. So again, what we talked yesterday, that the Indian thinkers start always from grammar, because the gender of the word is very important. If Brahman is a neuter gender, that means he cannot be stimulated by the beauty of that lady Shakti. So this it's a play with the words also, but by the way, also hitting at some philosophical basic idea, which is in Kashmir Shaivism, that Prakasha Vimarsha and Shiva Shakti are complementary. Now, how this comes here, I'm not going into the entire argument, otherwise you will say I'm going too slow. Which I will say. Now, let us come. I'm always trying to go to the more spiritual interpretation, and leaving aside the more philosophical ones, which are also necessary, but it requires more time. Where he goes into argument and counter-argument, that somebody could be objecting this and that in response to that, and so on. But we are coming to the page 48, 49. And the Sanskrit also, would like to read the Sanskrit 46, the last para. Moreover, when in that noble person who attentively pursues the teaching of the Spanda principle, whose quintessence is flashing, throbbing consciousness, becomes manifest, then even when experiences of pain, pleasure, object, subject, or their absence occur, they are considered by him as naught, because to him everything appears only as the quintessence of the delight of Spanda. Now, what he translates as delight is chamatkara. Spurata sare spanda tattve spurati. Sarvasya etat chamatkara eka rasatvat. And this is, I mean, it's just untranslatable. You know, it's also full of aesthetic concepts, rasa and chamatkara, so that overflowing joy of experiencing that delight, which expresses itself in a state of wonder, of surprise. Chamatkara. Chamatkara is always that absolutely overwhelming experience of wonder. It is both in aesthetics and in mystical experience. And
is it one of the 9 rasas? You know, there are 9 rasas in aesthetics. Is it one of the 9? No. Rasa is first of all an overall concept, which is then divided into that is purely a matter of aesthetics. But chamatkara is the overall. See, in any, of course, there is one rasa which is called adbhutat, but that is not meant here. It's not.
That is not meant. Chamatkara means that overwhelming experience, which can be anything. It can be
a sunset, or it can be beautiful music, or it can be meeting a perfect being, meeting a great master, and everything is chamatkara. But whenever you are overwhelmed by an experience which produces something new, wonder means you wonder like a child discovers something new. You just look at his eyes, that this is some new discovery. And that freshness, that newness, that is chamatkara. And in the Shiva Sutras, and again and again we have to refer back to the Shiva Sutras, there is this beautiful sutra, Vismayo Yoga Bhumika. Now, chamatkara and vismaya are in a way synonyms, but not exactly synonyms. But still they are used in the same sense. Vismayo Yoga Bhumika. The stages of yoga are full of wonder. So every new stage brings a new sense of surprise. It's a surprise. It's not that, well, you have read it in the book and then you say, oh yes, acha, this is what I have just. But it's not like that, you must be overwhelmed. And something unexpected, even if you have read it in the book, but when you're actually experiencing, it's quite different. It is it's always wonderful, and so that is this chamatkara which he has translated as delight. Give me some. So this passage is very beautiful, and which summarizes because to him everything, thank you, appears only as quintessence is the sara of the wonder of, Spanda is not even there. Sarvasya etat chamatkara eka saratvat. Spanda is not there. Sukha dukkha adhikara. No, again you have to put that you sing into bracket. Spanda. As the quintessence of the essence of this wonder of delight, whatever you may. And then, no wonder, he now quotes his Mahagurava, and this Mahagurava means in plural is again Utpaladeva. And
so Spanda is, even the second one is not in the Sanskrit.
Spanda is not in the Sanskrit, no. That's what I say, you put it in bracket. And now this is really the secret of the entire Kashmir Shaivism in this one verse, which he quotes from the Shiva Sutravali.
We don't have a book of Sutravali here. We don't have the book of Shiva Sutravali here.
But it's in the book. He quotes it here. It is there.
Page?
Page 49 in the English translation and page 46 in the Sanskrit.
So the same one.
So I'm just giving my own translation. Dukhanyapi sukhayante, vishamapi amritayate, mokshayat chasam sara, yatramaga sashankara. Where even suffering is transformed into joy, where even poison becomes nectar, where the world itself is a way of liberation. That is the way of Shankara. Shankara Marga. So this is that whole process, that whole transformation. And it's even, well, you can call it a transformation, or you can call it something happening simultaneously. It's like in certain school of Buddhism, you say samsara is nirvana. I mean, it is. Mokshayate samsara. So that samsara itself is moksha, is a way of moksha. It's not a slow process of transformation or anything, but it is like that. But the one who perceives it like that, who experiences it, has to be an Utpaladeva, or who, as he says, that noble person who attentively pursues. See, what it requires a lot of awareness, a lot of sensibility to perceive it in that way. The path pertaining to Shankara means the preeminent expansion of the highest Shakti, who becomes a means to the attainment of the nature of Shankara. Yatra Marga Sa Shankara. Now, in the commentary, a Sanskrit commentary on the Shiva Stotravali, Kshemaraja interprets Marga as Param Shaktam Padam, the supreme state of energy. So it's not just a path, it's a state. So why does he say this here? Because it was a question of dealing with ordinary emotional states and experiences which are bound very much to our psychic, psychophysical limited existence. So the first thing was to recognize that there is something underlying that physical experience in which it is threaded. That was the first sutra. The second sutra says that there is neither pleasure nor pain, nor subject nor object, and they do not exist in reality. But that which exists when they are not there, that exists in reality. So there is one dharana in Vijnana Bhairava. Where is my? Where he says what happens when, I have to find it. It's rather towards the end. There's something very much connected, because we did the Vijnana Bhairava. Sometimes to connect the two texts is very useful. Of course, this connects, verse 136 connects to the previous sutra. All association with pleasure and pain occurs through the senses, means we have the Puriyashtaka here. Therefore, detach yourself from the senses and abide within your own self. This is a more simple method concerning the previous one. And then a little advanced one, or dear one, where the mind, the individual consciousness, the vital energy, and the limited ego these four have disappeared, then the nature of Bhairava appears. So that is already the negative state of this sutra. But I'm meaning, this is 138, but I'm meaning another one.
That is what we are trying to do. We are not able to do it.
Huh?
That is what we are trying to do all the time.
Yes. Yes.
How to do that? That's the question.
I find that also, which I mean, it's a kind of, like here, there is neither subject nor object, nor pleasure nor pain, and what remains there, that is in reality. And so you have similar dharana, similar meditations in other texts, but of course Vijnana Bhairava is very, very fundamental. So now we come.
Can you please elaborate the last paragraph of the commentary on fifth?
Yes.
Last paragraph, the part pertaining to Shankara.
Yeah. Let us see the Sanskrit. Shankara Marga, huh? Shankaratma Svabhava Prapti Hetu Para Shakti Rupa Prasara. See, the path of pertaining to Shankara means the expansion of the supreme energy, Para Shakti Rupa Prasara, which is a cause of the attainment of one's own, I would just translate it, one's own divine nature, Shankaratma Svabhava Prapti Hetu. Now the expansion of the Supreme Shakti. Now Para Shakti, Para is not just an adjective of Shakti. Para is the highest not only manifestation, she is the supreme energy. So there are three levels of Shakti, Para, Para, Para and Apara. But Para is alone. She is the supreme. And that's why this whole tradition of Paratrishika, the whole Tantra, is dedicated to her, not to the other levels, to Para only. And she has her own mantra and she has her own tradition, and that tradition has been widespread in India. And Alexandra knows a lot about it. Para. So the tradition of Para. So often before we knew about these specific traditions, and that we owe to some of the scholars like Sanderson and so on, we thought it's just an adjective, Parashakti. It's not an adjective. It is her, if you want, it's her name, it is her being. She is Para. So there is no, it's not an adjective. So what happens, I mean, this is very important you ask this question, because in this whole process, now we are observing a spiritual process, which he has quoted Utpaladeva to see where this transformation of suffering into joy and poison into nectar, and this happens in that process. And this process is the prasara, means that expansion of that Parashakti, which is a cause, under the question of Meenakshi again, that she is the cause of the attainment. So without her, there is no attainment of Shankara, of one's own divine nature. And that's why he criticizes the Vedantis who say that they don't have any Shakti, so they have only neutral Brahma, which is totally neutral and sitting in the absolute motionlessness. Yeah, motionless, that is Nishkriya.
The word Punsat we use in a derogatory term in that stanza you read? The word Punsat is used in a derogatory manner in that stanza you read about Vedantis?
I couldn't get the question.
The word napumsak is used.
Napumsak, yes.
Is that used in a derogatory manner in that skanda?
Yeah, yes, napumsak.
Inert.
That's why grammar is often the key.
But the translation is very wide. It doesn't mean neutral actually. Neutral is a very wide translation for the word.
She said neuter.
You have to use neutral.
Now, he
Neutral
wanted to
also.
know if it's a derogatory, if it's seen in a derogatory way, in a negative way.
You have to speak louder, see, I'm very
She
deaf.
said yes. She said it is
I
derogatory.
don't see.
No, that's not in the government, whatever. It's just a criticism on the what Vedantis are saying. It's simple criticism.
It's simple that the
Yes.
napumsak actually is the it, you know.
Because Brahman doesn't have any activity
So,
basically. They don't define any
The
explanation.
meaning
of
is
activity.
clear. Where he is male, not female. Napumsak is it, basically, not male, not female.
Comes at the wrong time. So we will try to do verses 6 and 7 so that we, in the afternoon, we can proceed further. 6 and 7 belong together. Now he has been speaking about Puryashtaka, which implies the senses and the mind, the intellect and the ego. And now he comes to the whole question of senses, sense experience. Yata karanavargoyam vimuro amuravat svayam sahantarena chakrena pravritti stiti samriti labhate tat prayatnena parikshyam tattvam adarat yata svatantratātasya sarvatra iyam akritrima. Now these two verses contain a very, very central concept of Kashmir Shaivism, but still not the term Spanda. So yesterday Meenakshi was asking why this text is so important. This is the only basic text on this whole school of Spanda in the whole of Indian philosophy. And still he is so reluctant to use or to describe the term Spanda. So this is very significant because as in the Vijnana Bhairava we have always stressed, that it's not a philosophy or a definition. You have all this philosophy, you have it. But here it's a question of the experience. And if at the level of experience you immediately come with a definition, you first have to lead. You have to lead the sadhaka to reach that point where that spanda can flash, as it is used at all the spurati, where it flashes. So it's not just to give you a nice definition at the beginning, then you say, yes, now I know what is spanda. So we can go home and we don't need to spend the rest of the week. So he is still on the way of leading you through the experience, and the experience means through our senses. So that the normal perception way of perceiving. So let us first read. I'm sorry, I should read also Mark's translation because the book is so heavy. That principle should be examined with great care and reverence, by which this group of senses, though insentient, acts as a sentient force by itself, and along with the inner group of senses goes towards objects, takes pleasure in their maintenance, and withdraws it into itself, because this natural freedom of it prevails everywhere. This is not bad as a translation, not bad. He doesn't add things which are not there. But let us see what Mark says, 6:7. That principle should be examined with effort and reverence, because its uncreated freedom prevails everywhere. By virtue of it, the senses, along with the inner circle, although unconscious, behave as if conscious in themselves and move towards other objects, rest there, and withdraw from them. So first of all, we get, you're always looking for some practical instructions how to meditate and so on, but it is full, every verse is full of some practical hints, only you have to get it. It's not, this is not like a cooking recipe that you do, take this and then you get this and so on, but you get hints. Everything contains a hint towards practice, because observing yourself, first of all, your own states of mental ups and downs and all that, which he has done in the previous verses. Now here it's to observe the senses, what happens with the sense experience. And there is a practice implied. Pariksham tattvam adarat. Examine this reality with respect, with reverence, with and this is beautiful because we have a similar expression in the Vijnana Bhairava, where I think it is puja, the spiritual adara. To observe, to examine with respect, with reverence. I would like to have some alternative. You know, we live in a generation where the word, especially in the West, of course, the word respect doesn't have a very good.
It's an element of Shraddha.
Doesn't have a good press, but adara. Honor, respect, reverence, honor, attention, care, notice, close application, careful effort, eagerness, regard for, it's even earnest desire, endeavor. And even it means love, even love. So respect may be not the word which we like most, but in that...
Is that wrong?
Yeah, it depends on from what background you come. Once I had one participant and she was so reacting. You remember that Vijnana Bhairava seminar? She said, no, we don't want to have respect, and it is all very, it's...
Technical matter.
Yeah. No, but reverence, even love, and attention, care.
Yeah, all those.
So, yeah, this whole range has to be. How do we examine? How do we analyze our own experience, starting from the sense experience? And that also has to be examined with great care, with great, And why? Of course, the why comes immediately, because the senses are divine. So that care and that respect is not offered to our individual ego-centered
being, but to the divine senses. So that will come here. So the practice Pariksham Tattvam Adarat. Now, the first statement he makes is that the senses, means the organs themselves, they are insentient. They don't, the organs disconnected from the mind and from the consciousness, they are insentient. But it is only, thank you, when they are along with the inner group of senses, Antarena Chakrena. Chakra, we had the Shakti chakra, so Shakti chakra, one of the meanings is also the group of senses. They are pravrittis chakrena. Saha antarena chakrena pravrittis stiti samriti labate. Yeah, and this, I didn't complete the injunction for practices prayatnena pariksham tattvam adarat. There is effort and there is respect. And there is a spirit of analysis, analyzing yourself, analyzing what is going on within you when you have some sense experience. Huh?
That's the word pariksha.
Yeah, pariksha, yes.
Examine.
Yeah, prayatnena. So, I mean, this is also a kind of meditation or of self-observation, self-analysis, to observe what happens with your sense experience. That although they themselves are not sentient, but they are pushed, they are enlivened by the inner chakra, Antarena Chakrena, chakra of senses, of the sense divinities. Yatas Vatantrata Tasya Sarvatra Iyam Akritrima. So the process is of going out. I mean, it's a very simple observation, going out, staying there for a moment and then returning. Samriti, like samhara. That's what we say, that the 5 acts of Shiva, they are constantly going on, or even in our sense perception. It is creating by going out, then establishing by staying, remaining with that object, and then withdrawing. With samhara actually means withdrawing. It doesn't mean destroying. You know, don't destroy the object by taking it in, but it's taking it in. And so these are the 3 basic phases of sense perception.
Can you write the 5 these of Shiva's 5 steps?
Yeah, I think that is.
I mean, we would want to write those.
Yeah, I will write it in the. Yes, I will write it. Yeah. But I think you are a Shaiva, you should know that. This is so basic. It is so basic.
You are just being introduced.
I will write it. Yes.
Question: is it the senses and this careful perception and withdrawing? Is it the quality of presence? In every moment, present.
Yeah.
Present.
Yeah. No, and also to be aware that it is not the organs which are experiencing, but it is the power behind the organs, and this power is the Karaneshvaris. Karaneshvaris are the Shaktis of the senses. So what normally, if you are not in the spiritual practice, or you're not aware of what is going on and so on, then you're just gone outside, and you cannot reflect on that. But when you are on that path, then you are aware that there is a power behind, and this power is called Karaneshvari. These are the Shaktis guiding the senses. So where we have to go back is to the Karaneshvaris. Whereas, let's see, all the spiritual traditions, they have spoken very badly about the senses, because they are whatever destroys your spiritual path, it's all attributed to the senses. But it's not the senses. If you are aware, and you are aware that these senses are empowered by Shakti, by a power which are not your organs, which lies beyond the organs.
And yet it's what causes Maya. And yet attachment to the senses is what causes Maya.
But that's what I say. If you turn around, you see, the whole thing is it's the same reality. You only have to make this kind of turn. This is nothing different. You cannot escape the senses, you cannot escape the body. See, the body is also a medium of liberation. That's why mokshayaditya samsara. The same samsara becomes a way of liberation. The same senses become a way of enlightenment. But it depends on, that is your freedom. And that's why he says, svatantrata, here there's a misprint in the Sanskrit, tasya sarvatra iyam akritrima. And this is the absolutely, akritrima is such an important word. Unartificial means natural freedom, absolute freedom. So you are free to turn this whole circle which draws you down, to make it in the opposite direction. And that is the freedom which is given to you.
So is there it's a thin dividing line between the two. So at what point, can you define that point in which one becomes the other?
See, these texts are very, very compact, and then you have to, that's why these commentaries, they make it very explicit and so on. We can add our own mirch and masala, but actually they give us so many hints how to transform that normal limited consciousness into that absolute unlimited freedom. Svatantrata tasya sarvatra iyam akritrima.
Which is the sense of this akritrima?
Akritrima means made. Akritrima means
spontaneous,
which is not made, not
without effort.
But unartificial, of course, is the normal translation, unartificial or natural, but we translate even sahaja by natural, but the implications are different. But akritrima means, see, our ego, what he has described before, with also this Puryashtaka and so on, it's all artificial, because we ascribe
to ourselves that is I am this body or I am this mind, and the body is not so difficult, but the mind is more difficult. So that is very kritrima identification. So the whole identity which we build up around our individuality, that is all artificial, kritrima. See, at the moment when you die, what is there? It's all gone. I mean, this artificially built up identity.
Which is untrue.
Yeah. So that's why this akritrima is very much used, especially in relation to the I sense, the aham. Akritrima aham means not that artificially created ego, which is so much bloated up and increased, and we know this, that the world is existing in that way. But that's why this attempt to come to that source which is free from that artificiality. Yes?
Is this an act of free will? Shiva doesn't pervade that. Is this an act of free will, this artificiality which we're talking about?
Evil?
No,
Free will.
he wants to know if it's not an act of free will, this artificiality. If it's
Is
not
this an act of free will, this artificiality?
Oh, well, of course.
Shiva does not pervade in this realm. Is that? Let her answer, please. And the same way it goes in the verse 9, I'm just going slightly ahead. When you talk about impurities which hinder the thing, are the impurities created by the self? Shiva does not pervade in that realm?
Impurity?
Yeah, in the verse 9, it talks about impurities which hinder my progress to meet the divine. Are the impurities my creation, a self-created? Shiv does not pervade in that realm?
Well, this is a very big question. You see, when you look at it from the divine point of view, then everything is created by him. Nothing is created by you.
Then how can it be a false reality or an illusion or anything which you keep talking about every 5 minutes?
But see, that freedom which is the divine freedom, it's given to us, and we use it in a very limited and restricted way. So that is our own contribution. So if we misuse that freedom to...
I have the freedom to misuse my freedom?
Well, see, freedom is otherwise, what is the meaning of freedom?
No divine intervention happens in my freedom? The divine does not intervene in any manner in my freedom? Is my freedom created by the divine?
Ultimately, everything is created by the divine, but it is our responsibility to join in that stream of the divine freedom and not to break away. See, that the greatest, if you call it sin, in this tradition is Bheda. Bheda means to separate yourself, to create a separation. And that separation is what we constantly are doing. You see, separation between our selves, human beings, between everything and anything. So Bheda is the greatest obstacle. So the whole aim of this spirituality, of this path, is to reach a state of abheda.
The integration.
So I'm capable of creating the Bheda, which is the same. Isn't the divine responsible for the Bheda? Which is all pervading and runs through everything? I am divine, if I go by any philosophy which we're reading even now. So is the divine responsible for the sin of creating Bheda?
You see, when we are, everything has its own level of where it is meaningful to talk. And if you are at the highest level of your own consciousness,
And then you can say, well, everything is created by the divine. But if you say it from an individualistic point of view, then it is wrong, because that means it takes away your own responsibility. And I think we have to start from where we are, and where we are, if we are in our limited identity, then we better make an effort to get out of it. And not to judge either the divine or the human or anybody else, but to judge our own self. And that's why pariksha, you examine your own self. And then afterwards you pass any judgment if you reach that stage. But it's very easy to discuss these things at the level where they are not really applicable. And that's why the texts are also very, very restricted. When he was asking about Adhikara Bheda, normally you have to read these texts with a sense, as he said, with respect and reverence and a sense of commitment to this spiritual path. And then only you can proceed, and if you proceed you will find the answers to the questions, which are not just theoretical questions, they are highly practical questions. But unless we proceed and we reach a stage of integration and liberating us from our terrible limitations, and these limitations, there's a whole system, which I don't want to go into things which are not now in the text, Kanchukas. So the same qualities, just a moment, which are divine, like omniscience, Sarvajñatva. So all the divine qualities in our individual existence, we have limited them. We know a little bit and we think that we know everything, but we have limited, and that is vidya, raga and attachment. So the divine has a love for the whole universe, and we have attachment to a particular group of people, and we don't like other people, and so on and so on. So these are the limitations of individuality, which create the whole trouble, which create that separation. So unless we make an effort to overcome these limitations and to expand to that consciousness which is all-embracing and which is total freedom, then we cannot judge about things. It's our own responsibility. If you think that who has changed the world? It's a Buddha, it's a Jesus, it is a Shankara, it's an Abhinavagupta. It's the saints who have realized their own true identity. They have changed the world more than any politician. So it's we who have to change ourselves, and then we can expect to change others or the world or the system, whatever you may call it.
You said it beautifully. You said it beautifully. Because this question keeps popping up quite often. And this is how it has to be viewed.
Can you also say,
Yes, sorry.
in a very simple psychological way, that self-observation, the process of self-analysis and self-observation shows that how the different kind of thought forms that we are creating or interpretations that we are creating, they become the limiting things which imprisons, which constricts the world, and we are unable to see in any different way. So many of these doubts, where is the free will operating? Free will is operating everywhere. What we choose, and that is why more and more we open ourselves, there are greater chances of changing, transforming. Psychologically, I understand.
Yes.
In this manner.
Yes, absolutely. That's why, self-observation helps you to understand others, what's going on in the minds of others. And of course, the greatest, one of the cities which is reached, we will come to the cities, Vibhuti, in the last chapter, is to read the minds of others. But you can read the minds of others only if you first have understood your own mind and analyzed what is going on and what is creating these limitations. And so this is a process, but these cities do come, and naturally come. So that will come in the third section of our text. But I think it's better to stop here, and we leave the commentary for the afternoon session. And yeah.
I just have one suggestion.
Yes.
I wanted to understand more deeply Vimarsha.
Yes.
I don't know how much time.
No, it is very essential, yes. Yeah. See, this whole criticism which he said about Brahman being neutral because he has no Shakti is the necessity of self-reflection. Now, not in the rationalistic sense. Vimarsha is not at all a self-reflection in a rational sense, but in a sense of self-awareness. That there is this light of consciousness which pervades everything, of course. That is, but unless we enter into that state of self-awareness, then only we can become one with that light of consciousness. So it's a process, and Vimarsha, of course, is Shakti. But if that is not sufficient to say it is Shakti, it is. It's the dynamism of consciousness. You see, Prakasha is static. It's always the same. But Vimarsha is dynamic. And that is why in the dynamism we are involved. So all our practice, all our meditation, all our reflection, our study, it's all part of Vimarsha. And the more we can connect this study with the meditation and with our self-reflection, the deeper we get into that Vimarsha. So I hope that in the next days that will become clearer in our own experience also.
What is the etymological root of Vimarsha in Sanskrit?
Etymological. Well, it is mostly used. I can tell it. I think we should switch it on.